Welcome to another edition of the Legacy Warriors podcast, where we cover the top two feeder leagues to the UFC. This week we're talking about LFA 208, which goes down in California and is headlined by a matchup between Chris Mecate and Javier Reyes. Very fun fighters who are surely to produce fireworks here, and I'd be surprised if this fight ends up hitting the scorecards, which means we should have some fun in this main event. But there are some other very fun fights sprinkled out throughout this, I believe, 13 fight card that we got going down here. I do want to say, as you guys can tell, the lighting's not the greatest for this episode as, again, change in studio, still getting settled into this new place. Right across me, so behind the camera, is a giant window. And I have been unable to really get the lighting sorted out as of yet. I got my actual studio lights packed up still waiting to establish those. So I do apologize for the lighting and, again, the lack of background. We're still in the process of building out the studio. So if you guys have missed out on the content that I dropped earlier this week, that's the reason for this, prison-looking studio setup that I currently got right now. But again, just happy to be on video, have you guys see me and drop these breakdowns for you guys. So I do appreciate that from jump. Now, before I get into the breakdowns, I do want to remind you that there are several other MMA events going down this weekend besides UFC 315. We also have PFL MENA going down Friday morning. We have LFA capping off the MMA night on Fridays. And then on Saturday, we also have KSW, PFL Europe, and then we cap it off with the UFC 315 card. I have written breakdowns and tracked plays for all of these cards on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. Check the link in the description below for that. I believe I have 7 total plays for this LFA 208 card. You can either try to decipher it in the breakdown that I'm about to give you guys, or just skip the homework part of it and get right to the answers by checking out the MMA Lock of the Night Patreon page and all the other track plays that we got for the rest of this weekend. All right, I'm going to be somewhat brief. It is 10:30 at night. Just wrapped up the breakdowns for this, so I want to get this done ASAP. Hit the sack real quick, and then get back to studying for PFL Europe, which I'll have full card breakdowns for on the YouTube page, as well as in written form on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. But the YouTube version will drop for you guys probably late afternoon, early evening on Friday. So stay tuned for that if you're looking for PFL Europe breakdowns. All right, without further ado, let's get right into this again. Quick picks-ish type of breakdown for you guys, getting through these matchups pretty quickly. First fight of the night, Sheeler Ladd coming in at -140, going up against Roman Kiziuk, who comes in at +110. A fun grappling matchup between both of these guys. Ladd, obviously the brother of former UFC fighter Aspen Ladd, had a solid 10-0 run as an amateur, now 1-0 as a pro, but he's going up against a tough kid in Kiziuk who went 7-1 as an amateur and has won a boatload of competition from pancration to grappling competitions to IMMAF, which is the amateur organization over there on that side of the world, I believe. Bright prospect, very good grappling game, very good wrestling game, solid and slick jiu-jitsu as well. And I can understand why this line is as closely, or this fight is lined as closely as it is. I am going to lean ever so slightly with the Kiziuk side because I think his strength of schedule was a lot tougher than what Ladd had to face on the amateur scene on the North American side of things. This will be Ladd's toughest opponent, whereas Kiziuk has fought some solid resistance in the past, and he's come out on top. And I think he'll be able to do the same here by utilizing a slightly superior grappling game. It's just going to come down to the pace, pressure, and cardio of Ladd that might be able to outdo Kiziuk. But again, both guys still very young in their career, but I think both of them have a bright future. But I'm going to go with the Ukrainian here, Kiziuk, to end up getting his hand raised by decision. Next up, Roger Severson coming in at +600, going up against Vinny Diaz, who comes in at -900. Now, Severson is a representative of the scrap pack, which we have a few of those guys littered on throughout this card. Just exactly what you would expect. Decent striking game, but that's really about it. He's 4-6-1 as a pro, and it seems like he's really just getting on these cards because of his teammates at this point. He's going up against a guy in Vinny Diaz, who I'm familiar with, as I used to train out of a gym that I used to work with at up in Toronto, and I heard a lot of good things about him. We see him utilizing his grappling game a lot in his pro career thus far, and he's been very successful with it. He moved down to the MMA Lab because he knew there were more opportunities for him down there in terms of getting onto these regional shows so that he can try to expedite his career a little bit quicker. And obviously we're seeing that pay off for him, especially joining the LFA ranks now. There's a reason he's a minus 900 favorite. I expect him to go out there and grind Severson out, maybe even end up finding a finish, but I think Diaz pretty much has his way here and cruises in this fight. Next up, we got Shane Torres coming in at plus 240, going up against Shad Walters, who comes in at minus 300. Now, Torres is a fighter that largely competed for Fury FC down in the Texas area. He's a BJJ black belt and has really had a tough go of things over the last couple of years. He's 2-5 over his last 7 fights, including 1-3 over his last 4. He got finished in all of those losses, or in all of his losses except one of them. And the last time out, he actually got caught in a anaconda choke in 40 seconds by his opponent and put out clean. Normally, he utilizes a lot of heavy punches to try to close the pocket so he can get to his grinding grappling game, where he often pulls off some submissions and slick submission attempts as well. Unfortunately for him, he's going up against a very tough Shad Walters, who has largely shown solid takedown defense and defensive grappling, even though he was upset in his last fight by Jeremy Strobel Jr., who I just thought was an unheralded prospect that not a lot of people were talking about, but obviously will be now after the upset victory pulled off against Walters. But I don't think Torres will provide that type of resistance here. I think Walters will be able to shut down the grappling game of Torres, touch him up on the feet, and eventually knock him out within a round and a half. Next up, we got Noah Bay coming in at minus 150, going up against Cole Laren, who comes in at plus 120. Now, both these guys are strikers by trade. Now, Bay comes in with a salty 3-3 record, coming off of a decision victory over former UFC fighter Johnny Case for the Risen promotion, which is where he's had all 6 of his fights. But a lot of that had to do with the point deduction that Case had going into that matchup because of missing weight the prior day. Bay is a flashy and unorthodox striker, training at American Kickboxing Academy, as well as splitting time over there in Japan. His opponent, Cole Laren, made his LFA debut back in December. Showcases some decent striking as well. Went up against a very tough Ile Barzile, and that was a matchup where he really couldn't get to his game all that effectively. This is a toss-up of a fight. I'm kind of iffy about either side here. I'm going to lean Bay ever so slightly, as I think he'll be able to land the more impactful and eye-catching shots. But I could definitely see this being a split decision that ends up going to the scorecards, and maybe some people shouting robbery after this matchup. But I'm going to go with the Bay side. I just feel he'll be slightly more effective, but I have no interest in betting him at that minus 150 line. Next up, we got Aileen David coming in at minus 350, going up against Stephanie Nayen, who comes in at plus 275. David is now 2-1 through her 3 professional fights, all of which have taken place under the LFA lights. She likes to utilize a tepid pace striking approach from distance, utilizing combinations and really mixing it up with her opponents. She's leaned on her grappling in both of her wins, and I think she'll need to do that here against Nayen, but I think she can also be successful in the striking realm. Nayen, to me, is more of a fitness gal type of fighter, but I will give her credit. She doesn't mind fighting. She doesn't mind throwing in the pocket. She doesn't mind eating some damage, but she lacks a lot of the technical skills, which will likely keep her more so as a barometer test for a lot of these fighters that the LFA is looking to push to the next level. I was surprised she went the full 15 minutes like she did against Trilo last time around, and she might be able to make it the 15 minutes here against David, but I think David's striking acumen is going to be a little bit too much for Nayen, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if David's actually able to set up a knockout spot here to really put Nayen out. Whether it's a club and sub or a straight up knockout, I think David is just much superior to her, and I think she'll be able to fight through the tenacity of Nayen and land the better technical strikes and set up a finish here. Next up, we got Jermaine Edwards coming in at minus 200, going up against Temujin Ulzii-Orshikh, who comes in at plus 160. I bet heavily against Edwards last time around, as I thought the grappling of his opponent, Abraham Del Toro, would have been too much. But before Del Toro could get to his grappling, Edwards was able to club and sub him within a minute and a half of that matchup taking place. I wish there was actual footage that we could watch of that fight, but just seeing from the pictures that have been released of that matchup, that's what seems to have happened. And that's where Edwards seems to be most dangerous, when he can inflict that stinging power from range and really land that damage to get his opponents out of there, compared to guys that are able to out-grapple him and stifle him from that offense. Now, he's going up against a very tough Ulzii-Orshikh who, undefeated as a pro, 3-0 as a pro right now. He went on an 8-fight winning streak to finish off his amateur career, 5 of those coming by knockout. He's a guy that likes to apply a lot of pressure, throw a variety of shots at his opponents, and try to utilize that pace and pressure to break his opponents. His durability seems to be good. I wish he would just improve his athleticism a little bit more, his physicality and strength, because that might come to bite him back in the ass later on in his MMA career. But he's still a young kid. I think he's 23, 24 years old, still growing into his body. But given how these guys strike, if Orshikh's durability can hold up, this is a matchup where I can see him kind of drown Edwards with the pace and pressure that he brings. I think he'll be the one on the forward foot. I think he'll be able to counter Edwards effectively here. And I think he can really make Edwards uncomfortable by continuously pushing that pace, staying in his face, moving him backwards, and maybe even getting some grappling going as well if he can try to wear Edwards down. But, Edwards could absolutely snipe him early on in this matchup like he did against Del Toro. But, from the tape that I've seen, I think Orshikh has a good shot to pull off the upset here with his pace and pressure, as long as his durability holds up, which has looked good thus far. Let's see if it holds up against a striker like Edwards, and if it can, he will look damn good as a plus 160 underdog. So I'll pick him to win this matchup, probably by decision or late TKO. All right, next up we got Tony Charles coming in at plus 200, going up against Isaiah Pinson, who comes in at minus 260. Now, I'll start off on the Charles side of things, who comes from a kickboxing background and originally came across my radar back in January of 2023 when he made his LFA debut and came up short against Eric Fimbre. That was a matchup where we saw that he really struggles when fights get into that grinding grappling range, and if he can't get off on his power, we really see him start to slow down in terms of his productivity and his effectiveness, which is where opponents are often able to take over and really push him through the grinder. Now, back in January of 2023, he was a middleweight. Now he's coming in at light heavyweight, and I think that just goes to show that he's really not taking it seriously all that much. I believe he trains out of a UFC gym, if I'm not mistaken, has some decent power, need to respect that, but I think he's going to struggle against these other light heavyweights who are taking it way more seriously. And that's what he's getting in Isaiah Pinson, who used to be a heavyweight, but after coming up short against Abraham Babley, this is a spot now where we're seeing him going down to light heavyweight, and he looks damn good at this weight class. He comes from a football background, but has taken to MMA very well, and actually has a PFL victory over current LFA heavyweight champion Denzel Freeman. We've seen him mix up the striking game with his grappling and showcase that he can go 15 minutes if he needs to as well. I think his durability is good enough to deal with whatever Charles is going to be throwing at him. And I think we'll see Pinson slowly grind this fight out, really keeping Charles away from his grappling, and eventually start dictating the pace in the latter half of this matchup to end up winning this fight on the scorecards. At minus 260, I think this is a bit of a steal of a line. I think highly of Pinson, and I don't think Charles has the type of game that could cause Pinson problems here. All right, next up we got Alan Begosso coming in at minus 450, going up against Devachamats Batsuren, who comes in at plus 275. Probably butchered that name, is what it is. We're just going to go with it. I'll probably just go with Dava if I'm going to be referring to him, but I don't think I will. This is a 36-year-old BJJ purple belt who wants to drag opponents to the ground, but isn't really that good in terms of the wrestling or the rest of the mixed martial arts game. He came over from Mongolia to North America in 2023, and he's 1-2 through his 3 fights on American soil. And he's going up against a very tough and powerful Alan Begosso, who's been struggling to compete since August of 2023. He's had 4 fights fall out since since that point, with the last one being March, where his opponent fell ill during fight week. The 3 losses that Begosso has on his record are against guys like Farid Basharat, John Sweeney, who is a former LFA champion, and Richard Palencia, who was a very solid 9-0 prospect at the time. They combined for a 19-3 record at the time that Begosso fought them, and I think that just goes to show what kind of level he will come up short against. He's a guy that likes to dictate the pace by marching forward, landing big power shots against his opponents, and really trying to take command of the cage with that power and his explosivity. He's trained a lot out of Team Alpha Male, but it seems like he's set up shop in Las Vegas alongside his girlfriend, who is currently the UFC flyweight. I think she's ranked Luana Santos, but regardless, that's where Begosso is getting a lot of his training now. And I think that this is an easy matchup for him to go out there and shut down the grappling of Batsuren, and then from there really start to put the pressure on him with the striking. And I think that will eventually lead to him finding that knockout shot. So give me Begosso, and I wouldn't mind parlaying him anywhere up to -500, or even if you want to go up to that -800 line, I think it's more than worthy of that spot. Sorry, -400, -500. I put him at 90% in this matchup. So arguably even up to -900 if you want. I'd be very surprised if they fumbled the bag in this matchup. All right, next up, intriguing fight here between Adlan Benson, who comes in at +275, going up against Joseph Kropschot, who comes in at -350. Now, Benson, let's be honest, it wasn't looking that good for him in his last matchup against Eric Fiembre, where he was getting grinded out for the first 8 minutes. But then he pulled off this crazy reversal where, with his long, lanky frame, he was able to create some leverage and really get that reversal. And then from there, get a dominant position and quickly pound out Fiembre. Now, normally Benson likes to utilize his striking approach, establishing his range and utilizing his knees and his elbows to really keep his opponents at bay. His defensive grappling obviously still needs a little bit of work, but the fact that he's never been submitted in his pro career is definitely an accolade he can be proud of. That's 9 professional fights. If he continues to work on his defensive grappling, or at least his ability to nullify the damage his opponents try to impose on him from that top position, and then eventually work back to his feet or reverse positions and then really lay it on their opponents as they start to slow down, that's where he can find some success. And that's what he's going to have to lean on here against this BJJ black belt in Kropschot, who's also a scrap pack representative, and is also going to be looking to earn his first LFA victory in his second fight with the promotion. He started his career 4-0, then went on a 3-fight losing streak, and now he finds himself on a 2-fight winning streak after having stepped away from action for about a year and a half after that 3-fight losing streak he was on. He's nothing special in terms of his BJJ black belt. His wrestling is mediocre. His striking is not that great. His cardio management is a big red flag for me. And I think if he can get Benson out of there early, he's really going to struggle with the style of Benson. And I think that length and that reach is going to make it really hard for Kropschot to get takedowns past the first round here. And then from there, I think we see Benson start to take over with his damage-based approach. And I think he eventually puts Kropschot away probably in the second or third round. So to be able to get him at +275 is not a bad spot. Now, I get it. He might get taken down in the first round and it may not look good. And this will surely be a sweat. But there's nothing that Kropschot does that gives me too much pause here. I think he'll struggle to keep Benson down. I think he'll struggle to maintain dominant position. And then I think we see Benson eventually start to take over with his own offense and eventually get that TKO finish himself. So +275 for Benson. Sign me up. All right, next up, we got Francischinelli, who comes in at -430, going up against Angelo Rivera Jr., who comes in at +330. Now, Francischinelli stands at 6'6" with an 84-inch wingspan at welterweight. I don't think we've ever seen anybody of that size at 170 pounds and able to utilize his striking as effectively as Francischinelli has been able to show over his 4-fight career thus far. He's been able to batter opponents from distance, showcase good takedown defense, and immediately work him back to his feet if he does find himself on his butt. And then from there, he just picks opponents apart from distance, and he's finished all 4 of his victories in the first round. He's going up against a Chicago native here in Rivera Jr., who has a nearly perfect 6-1 record as he comes into his LFA debut this weekend. He has fought for a Fight Pass promotion in the past, CFFC, back in July of 2023, and that was a fight that he ended up going to a no contest with his opponent who had hurt him very badly with a head kick and then unfortunately followed up with another head kick. But at that point, Rivera Jr. was already on the ground and deemed a downed opponent, thus the fight going to a no contest. Only one of his 6 wins are against a fighter with a record of above 500, which goes to show the level of competition he's been going up against. I think we'll see Francischinelli really dictate the pace here with this striking, and I don't think Rivera Jr. has the grappling to give Francischinelli some trouble there. I think it's just a matter of time before Francischinelli finds that big shot to put Rivera away, and I'd be surprised if it doesn't happen within a round and a half. All right, next up, we got Josh Hokit coming in at minus 1,300 going up against Eric Lunsford, who comes in at plus 775. Now, this one really makes me scratch my head because apparently Josh Hokit is already signed to fight on the Contender Series. So I think he's just taking this matchup to stay ready, to stay kind of busy, try to get a little bit more experience under his belt. But I think this is a matchup he can easily win against a guy in Lunsford who's been very mediocre throughout his career. We know Hokit is a very strong wrestler, but he's really getting that confidence in his hands, which has allowed him to knock out a few opponents as well. I think we'll see him go out there and squash Lunsford quickly. But again, if you guys have been watching me for a while now, I never advise parlaying anything in that minus 13, minus 1,000, even anything over minus 800. I do not recommend parlaying, but I think this is a matchup that Hokit should be able to get done within a round, especially considering what we've seen from Lunsford in the past. All right, co-main event time now where we got Georgi Eivas coming in at plus 165 going up against Jacob Rosales, who comes in at minus 205. Now, Eivas is a guy that I originally came across back in March of 2023 where he went up against a guy named James Lynch for the Cage Warriors promotion. That night, I was pretty high on him because of the strength of schedule he had going into that matchup and what I've seen from him in the past. I was kind of surprised that he had no answer for the wrestling of his opponent that night, although he did show some good defensive work that ultimately kept him out of danger from getting finished, but ultimately going to the scorecards and losing that decision pretty convincingly. He did manage to bounce back. He's gotten a couple of back-to-back knockout victories. He's obviously most effective in the Muay Thai range where he's able to put combinations together and really hurt his opponents. But I think it's that early experience he's been getting in his career that's going to benefit him at this stage of his career. Now, he's going up against a guy in Rosales who's gone from being an intriguing regional prospect to kind of a mediocre regional journeyman at this point. He's 2-3 over his last 5 fights. He went 3-0 with Bellator, but he went 0-2 in the Contender Series and 3-2 with the LFA. His last LFA fight was back in July of 2022, where he was getting battered over 8 minutes until he eventually gave up a TKO loss to his opponent. He's battled back with 2 knockout victories under the A1 Combat banner, and then he ended up losing in February of 2024 to an 11-7 opponent who was clearly just beating him up on the feet and dictating the pace of that matchup. If Rosales can get to his wrestling and actually showcase dominance that he hasn't shown in the past, he might be able to get some good work here against Eivas, but I think Rosales is getting the public betting love because he's a little bit more known than Eivas at this point. But I think Eivas' defensive grappling has improved enough that he can shut down that game from Rosales, and then on the feet, I think Eivas is the better striker bar none. I think from there, Eivas can at least dictate the pace, get the respect of Rosales, and eventually break Rosales, which could lead to an Eivas finish in the second or third round. But it's really going to come to Eivas shutting down the wrestling that Rosales, again, calls himself a catch wrestler, but I haven't seen him utilize it super effectively, and not even to the point that I think he'd be able to take advantage of a guy like Eivas. So I'm going to go Eivas by TKO, probably in round 2 or round 3, but I'd love him at this underdog spot at plus 165. All right, that brings us to the main event of the evening where we got Chris Mecate coming in at minus 220 going up against Javier Reyes, who comes in at plus 180. Now, Mecate is a strong wrestler who's been putting his hands to work in his recent fights. He's knocked out his last 2 opponents in epic fashion, and even after getting face planted in the first round of his last fight, he quickly resorted to his wrestling to save him and shake the cobwebs out before he eventually got back to his striking in the second round and found the big shot to put his opponent away. He trains along the bloodline guys, which is, Cub Swanson, Danny Silva, Juan Archuleta, a very solid group of training partners over there. And it's going to be interesting to see him, maybe rely on his wrestling a little bit more to try to be as dominant as we've seen him in the past. He'll need to pull that out here against Javier Reyes, who has a slick striking style of his own, but we've also seen him be susceptible to being hit by other big strikers and being put away. Chris Mecate, his training partners, Laren Douglas, who was the last person to knock out Javier Reyes, and I think that we can see Mecate try to draw some, blueprint from what Laren Douglas was able to do and find that big shot as well to try to put Reyes away. Reyes, solid fighter, current FFC champion, if I'm not mistaken, trains out of the same gym that Waldo Cortez Acosta does down in Mesa, Arizona. But I think he's going to struggle with the type of guy and style of a guy like Mecate who can mix the grappling with the power striking as effectively as he does. And I think we'll see Mecate eventually land that big shot and knock knock Reyes out in the second or third round here. So give me Chris Mecate. I don't mind this minus 220 line on him either. All right, there you guys go. Legacy Warriors podcast for LFA 208 wrapped up there for you. Reminder, PFL Europe 1 full card breakdown will be dropping late afternoon, probably sometime closer into the evening of Friday. The card is on Saturday afternoon, so there should be more than enough time for you guys to digest that. So stay tuned for that. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the support. Good luck on all your action this weekend, folks. And I'll see you guys again tomorrow for the prop drop for UFC 315, as well as the PFL Europe breakdown. See you guys then. Peace.